May. You know what we're doing today?
No.
We're going to be talking a little bit about your past.
Great.
You're up for it.
Great.
You look great.
Thank you.
I love you, and I'm excited for this. Okay, because
It is fun to marry your greatest cheerleader.
here is your receipt of all your accomplishments.
My receipt. You know how I feel about talking about myself? Do I have to read these? My name is Shawn Johnson East. I feel very uncomfortable talking about myself, so here we go. I won gold medals in 2007 at the U.S. National Championships. I was a gymnast back in the day. I started gymnastics when I was 3. I made the USA national team at 12, which was in 2004, I think. I think my very first US National Championships was in 2005 or maybe 6, I don't know. I was 13 years old. I was a disaster. I came in 10th, which wasn't bad, and I still made it onto the USA National team. I was handed out my first US international assignment that same day, and I was told I would be flying directly to Brussels, Belgium to represent the United States.
Now on floor exercise for Chow's Shawn Johnson.
At 13 years old. 2011 PanAmerican Games team competition. We're missing a couple here.
Oh, casual flex. Wow.
This isn't long enough.
I don't like talking about myself, but this definitely doesn't cover all I've accomplished. Wow.
I just remember, it says PanAmerican Games. And I remember my first PanAmerican Games were by far my most successful. It was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and it was a blast. And I won a lot, which was cool. The 2011 PanAmerican Games, that was loaded with a lot of emotion. I competed in the Olympics in 2008. I retired directly after. In 2010, for my 18th birthday, I went skiing as a retired gymnast. I was no longer competing. Tore everything in my knee, had reconstructive knee surgery, ended up trying to come back to make the 2012 team. In the 2011 Pan American Games, where we won the team competition, was my very first international competition back. And I knew, competing at the Pan American Games, that I was done with my career. I knew I would never compete again after that. Which sounds weird to say, but I knew my chapter was done and it was time for me to say adios. But I made it back into the international scene, so I was really excited. Rio de Janeiro Pan American Games, okay, it's on here. All around uneven bars, balance beam and team, we won. That was a lot. It was really fun. I was 14 at the time, 15. That was crazy. That was like my very first very, very large international competition, and the first time I was really like on the scene. And to be able to do so well was really cool. Gold medals, Stuttgart World Championships. This is probably one of my favorite competitions in my entire life. It, I think, is almost equal to the Olympics to me. World Championships is known in the gymnastics world to be like a really, really hard competition. Because in the Olympics you have to qualify as a country, in World Championships you can qualify as an individual, so sometimes the individual competitions can be more challenging. This is a really big one for me because it was the first time I was competing against people I grew up watching, like the icons of my sport, and I won the all-around team and floor, which was really cool. I also remember beam was my event. I fell, I think, twice on the beam final, which was like, to even fall at all is bad, but to fall twice was bad. And I was pretty good at like keeping my composure in competition. I was kind of like machine-like, and I was just smiley. But I remember after that final, because it was my thing, it really shook me. And I remember being backstage, and I wasn't like a crier. I really held my emotions well. But I remember breaking, and my coach being like, okay, like, go find yourself a corner, let it out, and then it's time to snap out of it and go on to the floor competition, where I ended up winning. But I remember I was shook after that. Was I ever considering quitting in my career? Yeah. I considered quitting many times. So much so that like I would have the conversation with my coach because it was really challenging and I was really young and the time commitment was exhausting. But my coach would do this like interesting reverse psychology, not to be manipulative, but he was truly that supportive. I would say, I want to quit. He'd be like, okay, great. What are you going to do next? I'll be the first person to sit in the audience and like cheer you on, and I'll be at your practice and whatever. And it was always this harsh realization that I really wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for myself. So when I finally had to make the decision for myself, it was kind of like, is it worth giving up everything that I've worked for? And I kept saying no.
And what did it mean that you like were able to go through that hard experience and make it through? Why is that important?
Why is it important? I think for me, every time I was faced with like the decision to either continue going or to quit, I think I had to do a lot of self-reflection. I think that's really important. I don't think we, as a society, encourage that anymore. We always want to fall back on this idea of just keep pushing, like push through it. And I was really lucky throughout my career to be surrounded by a team, coaches, parents, everyone who really supported my passion way before anything else. So if the passion ever started dying, it was kind of like let's go back to the drawing board and see if that passion is still there. And if we can harness that, and if we can foster that, and if we can maintain that, then the work and the grueling hours and the hardship will be easier to get through. But my coach was always very cautious and protective of if that passion leaves, we are done. He would be the first to say, you're done with gymnastics, let's go find something else, because he was a firm believer in if you don't love what you do, there's no way to push through anything. So I think it's important because I feel like I was one of the few at the Olympics who still loved what I did. And I wasn't burnt out by it. I wasn't just doing my job, I was truly playing as a kid as well. 2007 American Cup all around. That was a fun one. It's like an international competition on US soil. One of the only ones we ever host as the United States. It's just a fun competition. Interesting thing about American Cup, not that any of you asked, it's the earliest competition of the season. So it's usually a rough competition because you're not quite ready and you're testing out things. So it's trying new recipes for the first time competition to see what sticks. And then 2008 Beijing Olympics, gold medal in the balance beam. Yeah, that was cool. My favorite memory of the balance beam though was in gymnastics for the Olympics back in my generation, there's something called peaking. So you would train all year to try to peak, hit your absolute peak performance on one day or 1 week. We would train all year for 1 week, whether it was US championships or world championships, whatever it was. The Olympics are really interesting because you have to train to peak for at least a month, because that encompasses US Olympic trials, the training, preliminary competitions, team competition, vault competition, bars, beam, floor. And over the course of that time, that's a month long, and trying to hold a peak for a month is absolutely absurd and just exhausting. So the balance beam was the very, very last day of competition for me. So I had been peaking for a month and I was toast. I was a ghost of a body and of a mind. And I remember going into warm-ups and I was an utter disaster. Couldn't make a skill for the life of me, couldn't stay on the beam for the life of me, didn't know which way was up. I was done. And I think my coach was like, oh God, I don't even know what to do with you. And I think we both kind of had this moment right before I went out to compete the final of no idea how this is gonna go. By the grace of God, I stayed on the beam and did a great routine, decent routine for me. Landed, watched the rest of the girls compete, and then my coach and I looked at the scoreboard and there was a number 1 by my name. And it was just funny because I remember we looked at each other and kind of giggled, both knowing very well how much of a hot mess I was that day. 2, knowing it was not my best performance, but 3, knowing it stood up that day and we got a gold medal because of it. And it was just like a breath of fresh air, but it was just funny. We were exhausted. I was like, can we go sleep and eat cheeseburgers now and be done with this thing? 2008 Beijing Olympics, silver medals in the team all around the floor. My dad called me Silver Bells during the Olympics, which was so sweet. It was an incredible experience. I remember, just to give you perspective of how young we were, me and my teammates trying to cast Harry Potter spells on the other countries so that they would fall. Because we were literally children. US National Championships, gold medal, US National Championships, silver medal. Got a silver? When was that?
What's it like to have so many medals you can't even remember which one happened when? What's it like?
Nastya, Lucan, and I were best friends, and still are best friends. But we were each other's biggest competitors. And no matter the competition, it was like, who's gonna get it today? You or I? So she must have had that one. Winner of the ESPY Awards, Best Female US Olympian. Pretty cool. I don't really remember that. I remember being there. I remember meeting Condoleezza Rice more than I remember the award. She was backstage. It was really cool. Dancing with the Stars Mirrorball champion. I was 16 years old. It was right after the Olympics. Right after the Olympics, I did all these interviews where they would be like, what's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? Whatever. And I remember saying Dancing with the Stars. Within a week, Dancing with the Stars called and said, do you want to come out and watch like a live taping? And I was like, yeah. After I watched it, they brought me back into a conference room where they asked me if I wanted to be on the next season. They said this is a little unprecedented because we have never had a minor on our show at the time. So I was the first minor to ever be on there. And they said we have a lot of stuff to figure out as far as like, I really appreciated it. They desperately wanted to protect the innocence of my age and not mature my age on the show. They wanted to protect that I was 16 years old. And so we had a lot of strategic meetings with the show to make sure that I was still a kid. And I was partnered with Mark Ballas. We won the Mirrorball, and I remember thinking I had like re-won the Olympics. It was really cool. US Gymnastics Hall of Fame inductee, yeah, that one was really cool. This feels weird. Dancing with the Stars, second time competitor, all-star runner-up. I'm not bitter about it at all. We should have won. Derek was a master genius. And it's less about me saying like I should have won the All-Star season, and it's like 1,000%. Derek was a genius that season. And what he created with his like choreography and just the storytelling, I wanted nothing more than for him to have that All-Star trophy. He deserved it. The winner did really good too, but like Derek should have had it. New York Times bestselling author. Yes, that little thing. During my entire career, I kept journals and diaries. It's more so during World Championships and the Olympics than anything, about what I was going through and how I was feeling and like all of these things. And then I basically took those to an editor, and her and I worked together to create a memoir or a book. And it was a really wonderful experience. I got to like relive and actually digest a lot of the stuff that I went through in a beautiful way that I tried to numb myself from. And I mean that in the sense of like when I was at the Olympics, I never wanted to let myself absorb the magnitude of being at the Olympics. So I was like, oh, it's just not a big deal, not a big day. But being able to like write the book, I was like, holy crap, I was actually at the Olympics. Iowa Sports Hall of Fame. Iowa is a major reason that I was so successful. They were my biggest cheerleaders and supporters and did everything that they could. International Gymnastics Hall of Fame, that one was cool. Being able to be recognized internationally in the gymnastics world meant a lot. I remember accepting that award. I was pregnant with Drew, which is crazy. Investor of Angel City FC, this is where it gets fun. I feel like I invested so much time into like my sport, but now being able to be out of my sport and invest in women's sports has been really special. So that was like our first taste of it, and I loved it. President and CEO of Family Made. Yes, with my husband. I absolutely love what we do. I love that we get to create fun content and share our lives and also celebrate the lives of others and families and celebrate family in a way that is impactful, hopefully. Founder of Moment Makers. Yes, that one was fun. Our first big initiative was covering the expenses or granting grants to athletes competing in Paris who were also parents. So I didn't want parents competing at the Olympics having to feel burdened by the idea of like financing a way for their child or their spouses or their family to come over and watch them. So we supported that. Board member of Children's Miracle on the Arc, that one's really cool. That's a huge, huge honor. That's like a pinch me thing. Investor in Indie Ignite, the women's PBF team. Again, being able to invest in women's sports is really special, especially being a mom to a girl. 8 years married to my best friend. 5 years a mama to the best babies in the entire world. Greatest job in the entire world.
Now you get to sign it.
I sign it? I sign my receipt?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
So, do you do the things for the accolades, or do you even describe yourself as ambitious, or why all this?
Why all this? I don't know. I was really lucky to have parents who really instilled in me this idea that I could do anything. And I kind of believed them. I had a lot of pushback in my gymnastics career. A lot. I had a lot of people telling me there was, like, I was absolutely nothing, and how I was going about it, which was a different way than that had ever been done before, would never work. I would never make it. I would amount to nothing. And I was really, really grateful to have a coach who said, F them. You will, and you are, and nothing will ever stop you. And you'll do it differently, and you'll have more fun, and you'll still be a kid. And he helped me have that irrational belief that ultimately resulted in all of it. And now, I want to prove to our kids that they can do the same. So I got to keep doing it. And now I have an irrational husband who makes me believe I can do literally anything. There's a common denominator here.
Do you feel like you're passing behind you, or it's yet to come, or do you feel like you're right in the pocket right now?
I feel like all of these are really, really cool, obviously. And I would never want to like diminish the fact that like it's incredible what I have done. But I do think my greatest days are like now and to come, by far. Being a mom is the greatest honor I've ever had in my entire life, and a wife. Way cooler than any Olympic gold medal.